Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. The India Idea Summit hosted by the US-India Business Council starts next week. CNBC-TV18 and USIBC are coming together for an exclusive partnership. The theme this year is engaging India with trust, resilience and growth. You can catch all the action and highlights from the summit through next week on CNBC-TV18 and CNBC-TV18.com. Watch out for conversations with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, US Secretary for Commerce Gina Raimondo, Mira Hooper, Director, Indo-Pacific Strategy, Lindsay Ford, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and Anne Neuberger, Deputy National Security Advisor. This summit comes just ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States and can potentially set the agenda for discussions in Washington, D.C. To discuss that and more, we're joined by Atul Keshav, former Ambassador and President at US-India Business Council. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us here on the program. Let me begin by asking you about the India Idea Summit, which kicks off next week. What's special this year, and what is the theme that you would want the business chambers of both countries to focus on this year?
Parikshit, thank you very much, and thank you for your partnership and having me on the program. Look, we are all about resilience, trust, and growth. We believe that the United States and India, being great democracies, are truly resilient because of our great and dynamic and diverse populations. And the pandemic has proven how well we have gotten through tough times together and how much we trust each other. And beyond resilience and trust, growth. Democracies have to deliver. USIBC believes in free trade, open societies, open markets, the power of free enterprise. And we want to see both countries take relations to the next level. We want to hit $500 billion in annual trade in goods and services between the United States and India. We want to see India rise to be a 10, 20, $30 trillion economy. We think it'll be good for America, good for India, good for all of the free people around the world.
Right. Ambassador Keshav, USIBC is also hosting the inaugural Indus X Conference in coordination with the US Department of Defense and the Indian Defense Ministry. What is this all about? Because defense will be a critical component of the Prime Minister's state visit to the United States this month.
Parikshit, there's been 25 years of efforts by a very large contingent of people in America and India to drive our strategic convergence. And that has largely been done. Now we need to drive the economic convergence. We're only at $200 billion in annual trade between the US and India. We urgently need to get to $500 billion. It'll be good for our peace and security for both of us and for the entire world. And then the next big thing is our technological convergence. I've said that it's as important as the nuclear deal, which I helped to negotiate and deliver for both of our countries in 2005 to 2008 timeframe. This ISET, Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, is really, really important. If you look at outer space, telecoms, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and then, of course, cybersecurity and defense, there is so much we can do together. On defense, we are having an Indus X meeting hosted by the USIBC at the US Chamber in Washington, on the margins of the visit, where the Pentagon and the Indian MOD are bringing together startup enterprises under our roof in order to spark a more intense private sector to private sector defense collaboration. That is critical in these very turbulent geostrategic times. Our two defense enterprises in both countries need to get closer together. They need to build the capability that ensures deterrence. Deterrence ensures peace and stability. Peace and stability ensure prosperity. So we're very proud to be able to host that. And we think that it's going to be a really good accelerator for US-India defense cooperation.
Right. Ambassador Keshav, there has been a lot of activity between India and the United States since January this year in the run-up to this state visit that's going to happen on the 21st of June. You've had Jake Sullivan and NSA Ajit Doval meeting. You've had the Defense Secretary going to the United States. The Foreign Secretary has already visited. There have been conversations between Secretary Blinken and External Affairs Minister Jaishankar as well. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has visited India very recently. A lot of momentum when it comes to defense technology and critical and emerging technologies. when it comes to the pillar on critical emerging technologies. What is the kind of breakthrough that you're expecting during the visit and meeting of Prime Minister Modi and President Biden? And what is going to be your recommendation to the governments, to the two governments at the India Idea Summit next week?
So, Parikshit, we were very honored to host the launch of the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies with Secretary Gina Raimondo, with National Security Advisors Jake Sullivan and Ajit Doval in January. We think that both the governments have really hit upon the next big thing, which is the technological convergence. Obviously, we'd like to see deals. We want to see deals across the entire spectrum of United States and Indian business systems. We want to see deals on electronics and the digital economy, semiconductors, fabless systems as well. We want to see energy deals. We want to see defense deals, aerospace deals, fintech deals. Deal flow is really important. And if we can get this right, and if we can boost trade flows, and if we can enhance the technological convergence, it's going to be good for the safety and security of both of our people. So we're encouraging this. We think the governments have definitely sent a strong signal. As the old saying goes, trade follows the flag, and the flags are waving, and they're giving a very clear signal on where our private sectors ought to go. So we're encouraging that. We support it in every way. The other thing I'd like to see, frankly, is I'd like to see more facilitation of the flow of talent. U.S. and India are brimming with talent. We are the innovation leaders in the entire world, and we need to unleash that potential even more. So one thing I believe in as a former diplomat, and I helped with establishing the consulate in Hyderabad, is we need more American consulates in India. You know, we ought to be in Bangalore, we ought to be in Ahmedabad, we ought to be in other places. There are more consulates, American consulates in France than there are in India. And I look at Bangalore when I've been there recently with the sheer number of American companies, the amount of American citizens, the amount of Indians working with American companies. The numbers are unbelievable. We should be in Bangalore. We should be in other places. And frankly, India could also put consulates in places like Seattle. And that talent flow is really important, like making sure that we can optimize the capability of our rather strong private sector means that we got to make sure that talented people can move and work and serve to produce the next generation of deep tech and future tech that's really going to impact all of our lives. So at the summit next week, the India Ideas Summit, we have Tony Blinken, as you mentioned, Gina Raimondo, U.S. senators, all kinds of folks coming and speaking, Ambassador Taranjit Singh Sandhu, my dear friend. And what we want to talk about is the ingredients, the policy ingredients and leadership that can spark the next level of prosperity for America and India and lift hundreds of millions of people up to new levels of prosperity and happiness and peace and security. We're all about that.
Right. Okay, Ambassador Keshav, just to go down specifically to the issue of semiconductors, which is also tied to a national security issue. There was an MOU signed between the Indian Commerce Ministry and the US Department of Commerce during Secretary Raimondo's visit. What kind of expectation do you have from the upcoming meetings that the Prime Minister will have in DC? Are we going to have some takeaways on the flow of technologies, on trusted partnerships in semiconductors between the industries of the two countries?
So, Parikshit, this is something that is led by our private sectors, right? They have the technology, they have the innovation, they have the designers, and they have the investment committees and the shareholders who decide how best to allocate capital. I say that attracting capital is like a flower trying to attract a bee. The system has to be in place for that capital to come and set up. We're talking about multiple tens of billions of dollars to set up a semiconductor ecosystem. You have to have the most stable electricity supply, the cleanest water. You have to have an electronics ecosystem in place. You have to have the quickest supply chain movement because a semiconductor chip moves around the world as much as 5 times in the process of being completed and going into the product. So you need to be really, really focused on what it takes to make someone want to make a 10, 20, 30 billion dollar decision about semiconductors. Now, here's the good news. India has clearly set itself the task of achieving this. I was in Silicon Valley with Minister Ashwini Vaishnav a few weeks ago, and it was really interesting to see how many careful notes he took about what it takes to establish a world-class semiconductor ecosystem. And we had all these experts who were talking about what it took to do that in the United States and in other countries around the world. And I think India has set itself a task, and it's very promising to see how much investment of time and effort and money India is putting in. I think that having more of a semiconductor capability in India will deleverage risk around the world. There's too much concentration of semiconductor production in very vulnerable strategic geographies. And so if India can really get this going and get the ecosystem in place, it's going to be good for India and good for the world. So this is where private sector deals have to be struck. Government can set the tone. Government can offer the incentives. Government can create the kind of enthusiasm, but then the private sector has to make the deal. And the deal has to work compared to a similar deal in a different place. So industries will look at regulatory issues, land issues, supply chain issues, ease of doing business, level playing field, predictability and stability of the regulatory environment, many, many, many things before they make a decision of that magnitude. And what I've seen is an enormous amount of effort by the government of India, and I think a lot of encouragement by the U.S. government. Remember when Janet Yellen came to India in November last year and said India is a prime location for friendshoring? That reflects the trust that we have in each other. And it's a trust that's been expanded as a result of the bitter lessons of the pandemic. When we needed help, India rushed to our aid. When India needed help, we rushed to India's aid. That's what friends do. That's what democracies do. That's why it makes sense to make semiconductors in India.
All right, Ambassador Keshav, thank you so much for joining us here, giving us an overview of the USIBC India Idea Summit. And we're really looking forward to covering it and broadcasting some great conversations from the summit right here on CNBC TV18. And in a way, the summit will also set the tone and give us the temperature in the room and also the kind of MOUs, agreements that can be signed when Prime Minister Modi sits down for those crucial bilateral meetings with President Biden in Washington, D.C. Thanks once again for being with us. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.